Hello everyone, and welcome back to theCUBE's coverage of HIMSS 2025 here in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Rebecca Knight. We are here at the Google booth talking about the future of healthcare innovation with many of Google's ecosystem partners. With that, I would like to introduce our next guest for this segment. We have Dr. Santosh Dixit. He is the Chief Domain Expert and Healthcare and Life Sciences Innovation Lab at Persistent Systems. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And returning, we have Shweta Maniar. She is the Director of Strategic Industries, Healthcare and Life Sciences at Google. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with you, Santosh. Talking a little bit about some of the challenges and need for innovation in this industry. Biomedical organizations generate tremendous amounts of data, but often struggle to extract insights from that data. What are some of the biggest obstacles that you see preventing efficient data use today?
Great question. I want to trace my thoughts back to the pandemic era. During the COVID pandemic, there was a big explosion of data, and people did not know what that data means, what were the relationships between that data that was generated. And I think that is where the need for converting data into actionable insights became more powerful, right? And that need is driving the industry as of today. How do you monetize data? How do you look at actionable insights? Keeping that as our central premise, we looked at what the life sciences industry currently is struggling with. There are three major aspects. One, the data is humongous, large amount of data gets generated. The data is interconnected. That means there is a sort of a network of that data. And the third is it's multimodal. That means sometimes you have a imaging data, sometimes you have a genomic data, etc. But the biological truth lies in bringing all this data together. And how can you do that is something that drove this innovation. And this is something we have taken the help of a concept in AI called knowledge graphs. And with the help of a knowledge graph construct with the Google tech stack, we have created this unique solution called Pi-OmniKG, right? So it's a solution driven by the needs of the current life sciences market.
So Shweta, he just started by bringing us back to the start of the pandemic, and that really did bring up this idea about how siloed data is and how there are all these regulatory hurdles that are really slowing down biomedical research. Add to that the lack of explainability. Where do you see things right now?
I agree. However, I will also say that I think that we're moving in a direction where explainability is going to have to be key. It's going to be king of how anybody is going to deploy any of these solutions, any of these tools, because you have to have trust in these systems, right? And I think we've talked about this before, but having trust in these systems, even if you're not a technical expert, is going to be key to how we're going to be able to move forward, because those who are going to be deploying, for example, Pi-OmniKG, may not be a technical experts. They might be the researchers or the biomedical scientists or those who don't have only a technical background or may not have a technical background at all, but they're coming with these science problems and a lot of data, and they're looking at how do you derive value from this information by asking the right questions of the system. And I know that Santosh talked about the Pi-OmniKG, but he didn't tell us what it actually stood for, so I'm going to ask him to do that.
We actually haven't even gotten there yet. So tell us a little bit about the solution that Persistent and Google have developed that addresses these challenges.
So we actually had an internal raffle for looking at the name, right? And this is something that came out of some discussions. So there are three components to the name. The first is Pi. Pi stands for persistent because sort of we are the co-innovators.
Fair enough.
Omni, as the word suggests, it's everywhere. So data is everywhere, right? So that's why we picked up the Omni sort of suffix. And KG stands for a knowledge graph, right? So therefore we have this solution called Pi-OmniKG. What we are trying to convey is that a knowledge graph can intake any kind of data. Data is everywhere. And I think that is the genesis of this kind of a name, if that helps.
So tell our viewers a little bit more about what this tool does, how it integrates all sorts of data from clinical trials, regulatory findings, and how it can help researchers.
Sure. So let's take the persona who will use this solution, right? So typically in life sciences, you are looking at senior level scientists who want to integrate a lot of data sources coming together to derive what is called as actionable intelligence. And that actionable intelligence resides in a good quality data, which is upstream. So in this solution, we have 3 layers to the solution. The first layer is how can you intake different types of data? And when I say different types, it can be classified based on modality. It could be genomics, it could be clinical data, it could be biochemistry data, it could be imaging data. The second layer of classification is structured versus unstructured data. In today's world, we know there are tabular data sets which we call structured, and then there are handwritten or some other PDFs, etc. So then how do you bring in this multimodal structured, unstructured data into the first layer, which is called as a knowledge base? And in doing so, we have used the Google tech stack, mainly BigQuery, to bring that data in the system. But the knowledge graph is only as good as the data. That means you not only bring in data, but you also curate the data. You look for missing gaps. If you want to create a synthetic data, that is also part of this entire equation. Right? Step 1, create a knowledge base. Step 2, you interact with the end user and ask what is the business use case I'm trying to solve. Yeah. That means I want to know what is the hypothesis or a research question that I want to look for actionable intelligence. Right? So for in the case of drug discovery, I want to know if gene X is of my interest for disease Y. I'm just taking an example. And then with the help of what is called as ontology mapping or schema development, we construct a knowledge graph. This is an automated generation of a knowledge graph where you have relationships between different data sets. And these relationships are depicted very nicely in the form of logical sequence and in a pictorial fashion so that it becomes easy to unravel the relationships. And the third layer is very important, is now we interact with the knowledge graph with the help of a LLM layer. Right? It's almost as if we talk to the knowledge graph. My analogy is like speaking to a wise professor. Right? I will always get a good answer because the professor is so wise, because his knowledge base is so strong, right? So the interactive knowledge graph is actually speaking to you with lot of evidence, with lot of primary reference to where it comes from, and it tells you relationships which otherwise are not discernible to the human eye. So all of a sudden, from a sea of raw data, you have structured relationships unraveled, and then you can talk to the knowledge graph with the help of a LLM, which in this case we have used the Google LLMs, etc. together. So that is the beauty of a knowledge graph. Knowledge graphs were always popular, but in the last 18 months, the ability to have a LLM talk to a knowledge graph has probably given it a second wind. Right? So that is how we are constructing this entire tech stack. Right? I want to talk a little bit about a couple of business applications or use case of the knowledge graph. There is a classical data deluge in the drug discovery area, right? In drug discovery, typically what happens, you bring in a lot of genomic data, you bring in laboratory data, you bring in some population genomics data. So it's like multitudes of data, large volumes of data coming in. But as a drug discovery scientist, I want to find relationships between this data. Because if I get that relationship right, I'm going to have a light bulb moment where I'll almost have a eureka moment that this is my target. But to get to that point, if I can construct a knowledge graph with this 3-step process, I should be able to expedite my research insights. And that is exactly where Pi-OmniKG is positioned, to help drug discovery scientists, laboratory managers, etc., to look at this kind of interrelationships together. Where we have seen great traction in the last 6 months with Pi-OmniKG is classically in the area of life sciences, where you have this complex data coming together, and then the knowledge graph will give you a pictorial relationships. Visual is always great because now you can relate to it. And then I can talk to the knowledge graph. And I have seen a wow moment with knowledge graphs through Pi-OmniKG, etc. Right? So I think that is how we are positioning this application in the industry.
One thing that I think is important to articulate is these different data types that he's talking about. They are coming from not only different sources, but they may not even be the same data types, right? So there's also this piece of this offering and this solution that then brings disparate types of data to be able to suddenly now work together and talk to each other in order to get the insights out.
And when you're talking about different types of data, can you just describe a little bit about...
Well, some of the examples that you were just giving right now.
So we are talking about multimodalities. I can bring in data coming from microscopy, which is very common in research. I can bring in data coming from pathology, very common in tissue research or oncology research. I can bring in genomics. Genomics is everywhere now. So I can bring in genomics data. I can bring in family history data coming from clinical family records, etc. So all data is sacred, all data is important, and all data is usable. That is what Pi-OmniKG allows you to do that.
So AI solutions are often difficult to scale, and organizations can't afford to wait when it comes to scaling. How does Pi-OmniKG ensure scalability and reliability?
All right. And I think that's where working with Google has been great. When we created the first prototype at Persistent, we had a proof of concept view to the solution, right? That means we looked at some open source data and we looked at how to solve this problem. And then we started interacting with Shweta's group. And the exact question was, how can we scale it up, right? Because ultimately we want to take it to the larger markets. And that is where the Google tech stack and the architecture with scalability became very important. Just to name a few components, and I don't want to steal the thunder from Shweta.
Please.
But we have brought in BigQuery, which brings in a lot of data ETL. Then we have brought in Vertex AI, which is the core AI for running the Google AI solutions. And very importantly, the Gemini, the toolkit, which is allowing us to do interactive LLMs. And because this is a scalable architecture, which can be easily customized to a use case, I believe that looks at the scalability problem. Shweta, as a Google expert, if you have anything to add on the scalability.
The only other aspect that I would add for today's conversation is around the flexibility as well. There's some elasticity in terms of we can go up and we can go down as needed by customer.
Yeah.
So it's not just being able to scale what Persistent can offer, but how Persistent can support the customers. I think that's a big piece of that.
Absolutely. And we have seen real life implementations now. So the POC uses, let's say, 1x of data, but in real life implementation, we have seen 50x of data coming into picture. And that's where that scalability delta is nicely covered.
So you've talked a little bit about how this is going to improve decision making and accelerate drug discovery. What is the upshot for the patient who is going to experience this in the form of precision medicine?
Oh, excellent question. Precision medicine by nature is driven by research, right? What precision medicine means is you want to have a bullseye approach to treating a patient. You don't want to do randomized treatment, etc. So in the case of biomarkers, genomic biomarkers, the choice of a genomic biomarker and its attribute to choose a drug is at the heart of precision medicine, right? And using a knowledge graph of this kind, we in fact have a use case of Pi-OmniKG where we look at a genomic profile of a lung cancer patient and we try to ask a question, how can I identify the right choice of the drug for this kind of a genomic profile? And all this is driven by bringing in a lot of data sets associated with precision oncology and by doing what is called as a genotype-phenotype correlation and bringing in a lot of evidence to that story, we are able to demonstrate that you can deliver a precision medicine paradigm with the help of Pi-OmniKG. And this is something we have shown to a lot of oncology doctors and they love the solution. In fact, few of my doctor friends suggested perhaps a precision oncology version of Pi-OmniKG can be deployed in a tumor board. In a tumor board, what happens is doctors come together, they look at complex scenarios, and then in real time, they take a quick decision to treat the patient. Now this is very critical. First of all, it's real time. Second, the margin of error is very less. Doctors want to look at evidence-based medicine. Now with the help of knowledge graph, with a very good knowledge base, asking the right question and talking to the knowledge graph with Pi-OmniKG, you can generate the evidence that builds confidence into a doctor. That is the healthcare application of it, right? So Pi-OmniKG, again, it goes back to that omni word, right? So if I understand the core problem statement, I can take it to life sciences drug discovery, I can take it to precision oncology, whichever way.
So Pi-OmniKG is poised to set a new standard for biomedical data management. What is next for this partnership and how do you see the industry evolving as it becomes integrated in terms of how care is delivered and how drug discovery works?
Would you like to? Yeah.
Next is, I think, really about, it's going to be about scale, right? It's now, the solution has been developed. We have been working together for a long time on this, and now it's getting it out there, right? And being able to talk to partners, to customers about this globally.
Yeah.
And you want to maybe talk about what's next or where the vision is for Pi-OmniKG?
I will take a innovation view. I know Shweta talked about application view. There is a lot to do in the core process of a knowledge graph, right? For example, this knowledge base layer, I can enrich with bringing different types of data. In today's world, there are new definitions of data coming up, not only imaging, etc. For example, there is a completely new term called exposome. Exposome is the sum collection of my environmental exposure that has happened over a period of my time, right? We never heard of exposome before, but I can bring in the exposome data into a knowledge graph, and all of a sudden I know my environmental risk, etc. So these are the art of the possible. So there is an opportunity to innovate. There is an opportunity to innovate on the technology side. For example, there are better ways to render a knowledge graph, right? So you can actually have a prompt with the help of Gen AI, and I don't have to create a schema. I can actually have a prompt which can create a schema on a go, right? That means you don't even need a scientific talent to define the schema. You can actually have a prompt define a schema. So we are actually experimenting with that kind of approach. And the third ability is to talk to the knowledge graph, right? Instead of getting me a textual output, can I get a graphical output all of a sudden in the knowledge graph, right? Because always we believe that visual representation is the best way of representation. So there are opportunities, and I think that is something we are already talking to Shweta, that we could have a Pi-OmniKG version 2.0 with all these new and cool features that can be brought in.
Really, the sky is the limit, right?
Yeah.
Because it's about what all these new data types, and then the more data types you bring in, the more questions you can ask of this entire system and this entire offering. And so I think a big part of that is not just can we do it, but which are the ones that are going to answer the questions that researchers, that doctors, and that patients ultimately want to know. Those are the type of data sets that you're going to be wanting to look into being able to ingest.
And a word of caution, I mean, at core we are scientists. We don't want to overdo we don't want to oversimplify what knowledge graph can do. The knowledge graph is only as good as the data.
Always.
Right? So there is a data premium that needs to be brought in. So in fact, we encourage all our collaborators to go back and look at the quality of your data, right? And in fact, we would like to improve the quality of the data. There is a data-related innovation that can come into the place. And the last part is, no matter what, the human is always going to be supersede the AI, right? That is where the responsible AI part comes into picture. And that is something we are constantly taking at in our mind, that we don't want to really talk about something that is humanly not feasible. I know technology is great, but that human wisdom is at the core of any technology.
Especially when it comes to healthcare.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, Santosh and Shweta, this has been a fascinating conversation and a really exciting future ahead. Thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That wraps up theCUBE's coverage of HIMSS 2025. You've been watching theCUBE. I'm Rebecca Knight.